Good morning, everyone. I am Fanindra. I'm audible. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So in this course, here our primary focus is on understanding Microsoft Azure administration, understanding the services that are there in Microsoft Azure. So if you're going to get into a role of DevOps engineer in any organization, then how are you going to act? So what are the technologies that you need to understand before getting into that role? We'll understand that, and then we'll go with DevOps. What is DevOps as a general? What DevOps is, and then we'll see how we implement DevOps using Azure technologies. So we'll cover the Azure part of administration part of Azure, and then we'll cover DevOps as a generic topic, and then we'll see how Azure DevOps today is in the industry. Okay, so before so I'll just take you through the slides of what are the contents that we're going to cover and what you are going to gain out of this session. Okay, so when we start the session, we will first understand the evolution of cloud, the introduction to cloud and DevOps. So how the things today are the way they are. What is cloud? Why are we using cloud? And how things used to be before cloud? How did we migrate from on-premise to cloud? How did we come to cloud? What is DevOps? How did we arrive till DevOps? What are the technologies that are like that constitute DevOps? There's some background noise. Vishnupriya, can you go on mute, please? Thank you. So, what are the? How did we evolve till DevOps? How did we evolve till cloud? How did we come till cloud? What were the technologies before cloud? Okay, what is cloud today? How cloud is operating? Okay, and how DevOps today is with cloud? How DevOps used to be? So, all these things, the history part of the cloud and DevOps will cover the evolution of how we migrated from the on-premise to cloud. What is cloud and how today things are the way they are, that we'll understand in the first topic when we go through it. Okay, now coming to the next topic, we'll understand OS basics. So in IT industry, you must have good basic knowledge on two operating systems, that is Windows and Linux. When I say Windows and Linux, it is Windows Server and Linux. Popular Linux flavors that we use in industry are Red Hat, CentOS. So we will go through the details of OS, because any activity you're going to perform, it is going to be on either of this operating system. So we'll go through what are the services that we get in Windows Server, what is an Active Directory service, what is an DNS service. Okay, the basics of services that are come out of the box with the Windows Server OS, and we'll see Linux basics. So how do we? I assume that most of you will not have no idea on Linux. So Linux, I don't mean Ubuntu that you use generally in your personal. So Linux here is what we use for IT industry. Okay, so we'll understand how Linux OS is, how the structure of the OS is, how kernel is, how does it boot, how does how do you create users, how do you format a disk, attach a disk. So if you, as an cloud administrator, you might have to do few administrations related to Linux OS and Windows OS as well. For example, if you have to write a script to automate patching on a particular server, then you must understand how Linux exactly works to automate the patching. Okay, so we'll understand how to format disk in Linux. We'll understand how to create users in Linux. We'll understand how to give permissions. So we'll go through the permissions of the Linux, and we'll see other services related to Linux, how to configure IP address for a Linux VM, how to configure firewall rules for a Linux VM. So we'll go through all that basics in our operating system basics. Okay, the next thing that we'll cover is networking basics. So this is very important irrespective of whatever technology you're going to learn in IT industry. So you should have your networking basics right for any technology you're going to use. For let it be the Azure cloud, or let it be AWS cloud, or GCP, or on-premise. So any environment, if you are not okay with networking, you won't be able to troubleshoot things, you won't be able to understand how things are working the way they are working. So we will go through networking basics. I'll explain you what an IP address is, what are switches, what are routers, how routing happens, what is a firewall, and what are subnets, how do you configure subnets, how do you divide a network into subnets, okay, what is CIDR, what is how to calculate subnets, how to calculate supernets, okay, and how the communication exactly happens in the network. So all these things we will be covering in our networking basics. So this is very important. So I want to cover this OS basics, networking basics, even before we get into Azure cloud, because these are the fundamentals of IT industry. So if once you're thorough with the operating system basics and networking basics, irrespective of the cloud, irrespective of technology, you will be able to master any technology. Okay, next we'll cover storage basics. So we'll understand how storage used to be and how storage is today, and a few basic concepts of storage. What is how does the input output operations work, okay, and what is LUN, and what are the types of disk available, how things used to be earlier in storage, how things are today in the storage, okay, so that you get an understanding of, if you are asked to configure some storage, you'll have a general understanding of what storage is and how do you configure storage. Okay, the next thing we're going to cover is basic software services like application service and web service. Again, these are not cloud services, these are on-premise general services. How does a simple app service work? Okay, so for an app, so what is an app service? So how does an application run? What are the types of app services available? What are the app services which are used today in market? So what are the app services which are very popular and used? You might even work in one of these app services when you actually get into a project. Okay, and we'll see what is a web service, what are the types of web services available, how to configure a web service, because these things, app service and web service, these are very important to understand, to get into deeper understanding of how an application or how a product is going to work. For example, if you get into a project where they use a particular app service and a particular web service, so if you are okay with the basics of what is an app service and web service, you will be able to easily figure out that how that particular technology is working. Okay, so how that particular software is working. For example, some people might use Tomcat as their application server. Some people might use Wildfly as their application server. So when you're clear with what an application server is in a generic, then you will be able to figure out how each of these is working. So we'll focus on that. I'll try to give an generic perspective on these softwares, because from environment to environment the softwares might change, but the technology is going to be the same, the basics are going to be the same. The OS is not going to change, the commands in Linux are not going to change, the way Windows server is going to work is not going to change, the way networking is going to work is not going to change, the way storage behaves is not going to change, the way application server behaves is not going to change, the way web server behave is not going to change. So we will look into all of these technologies with a very fundamental angle, so that whatever the software name is, you should be able to figure out the head and tail of it. Okay, now next we're going to cover in this session is Docker and Kubernetes. This is the most important topic, and this is the most popular topic nowadays going on everywhere. So I'll explain you what is Docker, what is Kubernetes, why Docker, why Kubernetes, how did we arrive till Docker, what is the need of Docker today in the industry, what is the need of Kubernetes today, what is the role that Docker is playing today in the industry, what is Kubernetes, where do we use Docker, where do we use Kubernetes, why are we using it, okay, how is it structured, how is it built, okay, how is it working exactly. So all these things we'll understand with practice. So whenever I'm taking sessions, I will show you a demo of how they work, and all you have to do is replicate the same in your own systems. So either you can do it on a daily basis or you do it on a weekly basis, that is up to you. But at the end of the week, by the time we start the next week, you should be able to implement whatever I show you in the class as demo. and I'll give you some assignments. You should be able to implement those. So only when you go back and implement and see how they are working, you will be more confident on that technology. Tomorrow morning, if I come and ask you what is subnetting, you might not be able to explain me. But if I give you assignment on calculating the subnets for some 10 IP addresses, okay, then it will be in your mind because you yourself would have done that exercise by your own hands. So if I ask you how Docker works, you might not be able to explain me, but if you have installed it on your own, okay, with few constraints, few scenarios, then you will be able to explain me properly on how does it work. You will face real-time challenges, you will learn on your own. So we'll work that way. So I will show you some working demo, or I'll show you the practical part of it. All you have to do is and go back and replicate the same, and I'll give you some assignments. Do it on that, okay, and we'll have a discussion on your assignments. If you're stuck, you can reach out to me. We'll see what are the general troubleshooting mechanisms, how to troubleshoot, how to get out of a scenario if you are stuck there. Okay, what are the things to take care. So we'll focus more on practical oriented, because once you get into the job, once you get into the role, nobody is going to ask you theory about it. Maybe while in your interview they might ask you, but once you're in the job, you have to deal with the scenarios practically on your own in day-to-day life. There will be a lot of issues. You should be able to troubleshoot. So only when you have the knowledge of practically implementing something, you will be able to excel in the job. Okay, so once we are clear with all these things, once I am confident that you are confident with all these technology basics, we will move to the main cloud, Azure. Okay, so we will see introduction to Azure. We will see Azure Active Directory. Okay, so we'll see how the Azure is structured. Okay, you will understand what are subscriptions, what are management groups, how do we create subscriptions, what are projects. We'll understand all these things. How does authentication happens, what are users available. So this is the topmost hierarchy of Azure. We'll start from there. We'll understand Azure generic, and we'll go to Azure Active Directory, the features of Azure Active Directory, what you can do, what you will be supposed to do when you get into the project. Then we'll understand Azure networking. So by the time you come to this point, I'll make sure that you are very thorough with the basic networking concept, so that when we're talking about Azure networking, it should be a cakewalk for you. Okay, you should be easily able to pick up Azure networking. For that matter, if you're very thorough with networking concept that we are going to cover in the starting sessions, you should be able to pick any networking, let it be AWS networking, GCP networking. So the basics are not going to change. See, the concepts that are there, it is going to be true. Only thing is UI will change. The way it is configured is changed. The names might change. Okay, a few names might change here and there, but the concept is going to be the same. Okay, we'll get into Azure networking. Then we'll see Azure storage. What are the storage options available? Again, once we have covered the storage in on-premise, this will just be an UI version of it that you will be learning how things are in Azure and what are the options available to configure. Okay. Then we'll go to understand Azure PaaS services. There are a lot of Azure services available. We'll try to understand most of it that you're going to use. We will try to understand Azure Kubernetes service, which is a PaaS service. Okay, so by the time you would have already had an experience or knowledge on Docker and Kubernetes on premise, so you will be easily able to correlate how it works on Azure. And I'll explain you how do you connect to the AKS, how to spin up parts, how to configure something, how to bring up your application, or how to troubleshoot if there is some issue. So we'll discuss all of that in Azure PaaS services. In Kubernetes, we'll discuss about application gateways, and we'll discuss about other services. We'll discuss about VMs in Azure, and we'll discuss about the app services in Azure. I'll explain you about each of these services in detail. How do you configure it? And I'll explain you set up your own personal free trial account, and you can also do set up your own environment, and you can practice on top of it. Okay. The last we will go to Azure DevOps. Once you are thorough with all this concepts, once you're okay with the networking and everything, we'll go with Azure DevOps. We'll understand how the Azure DevOps works, what are the features of Azure DevOps, what are pipelines, what is CI/CD, what are repos, how does commit happen, what you responsible as an Azure DevOps in an environment, in a project, we'll understand that, and what are you supposed to do, how to write a pipeline. So there might be different technologies in DevOps, how do you approach each technology. So tomorrow morning, if you come across a technology that you are completely unaware of, so what is the direction in which you should go to crack that technology, how to approach a technology, all these things will understand in Azure DevOps. So are you with me, guys? So this journey is going to be of 40 to 45 days excluding weekends. You can practice on weekends or you can practice on the weekday, and we'll discuss like once a week is over, the next Monday we'll discuss about the previous assignments and everything that you have done. And if you have any doubts, you can reach out to me anytime. We can troubleshoot your environment. I'll ask you to set up your own environment in your own personal laptops. So I just make sure that you have a decent personal laptop with 8 GB of memory minimum, so that we spin up some virtual machines and or some codes like Visual Studio or .NET something, so that for the practice purpose. Okay, so what are the outcomes of training? So at the end of the training, what is our objective? So by the end of the training, what will you be capable of is going to be this slide. So you will have an understanding of why IT industry today is the way it is today. So how did we arrive here? So that understanding you will completely get. So how things are, so that any team you go and work, or any company you work, so you will be able to easily pick how they are today and why they are today in that situation. You can easily be able to contribute to your team. Okay. Next is understanding of work culture today and what is the need of the hour. So what are they doing today? So why are, like today as an industry, we are migrating from virtual machines to Kubernetes. Okay, so the need of the hour is Kubernetes, Docker, Azure DevOps, Azure Cloud. The need of the hour is cloud. So why is it? Why? What is the need? So what are the benefits that we get, so that the industry is moving towards it? We'll understand that. Then you will be able to pick up any DevOps technology and master it. So there are multiple technologies in DevOps. Okay, we can start with, like, it's not only Azure DevOps. Tomorrow morning you might have even be asked to write some pipeline in Jira, write some pipeline in Jenkins, or integrate something with Jira. So you will be able to have an idea on what those technologies are. So even if you are completely new to it, you should be able to pick up, okay, this is this type of technology, and this type of technology gives me this output, and I have to approach it in this way and understand the features of this technology this way and configure it. So that understanding of the picking up of technology, and that understanding you're going to have by the end of this session. Okay, and then you should be able to pick up any cloud and master it. So we will be understanding Azure in depth, and Azure DevOps in depth, but with the knowledge that you're going to gain over this 40-45 days, you should be able to pick up any other cloud as well. You should be able to pick up GCP and understand how things are in GCP. Okay, how network works in GCP, um, how DevOps work in GCP, how repos are there in GCP, how applications, how VMs works in GCP, how to configure a VM. So all these things you should be able to pick up and master it with the knowledge you're going to gain here. So all you have to do is you have to practice a lot, and I will give you a direction in which you need to practice. So you should make your basics very strong, so that any technology you're going to pick, okay, you should be able to master it in no time. That will make sure happens. Okay, and then you're going to be very thorough with Azure administration. You are going to uh, you know create resources, delete resources, migrate resources. We'll discuss about taking backups of resources. So you will be able to do all the Azure administration work that a day-to-day engineer is supposed to do in industry. Okay, And the last but not the least, you will be able to work flawlessly with Azure DevOps. You will be able to write pipelines. You will be able to understand repos. You will be able to understand the artifacts, and you'll be able to understand how the structure of DevOps in Azure is, and you'll be able to work with Azure DevOps flawlessly. Okay. Yeah. So any doubts till here? Any queries? Any questions? Anything you want to ask me, like regarding the content, or if you have any query, if I'm going to cover something or not, or anything you can ask me.
So how was the job market?
It is good. It is pretty good. Like everyone is like lot of companies are using Azure DevOps. Lot of people are using Azure. Lot of people are using Kubernetes, Docker. So I think you will be able to pick up any of this domain and be able to work.
Okay. So will you cover both Azure administration as well in this?
Yes, we'll cover Azure administration and Azure DevOps.
Okay. So total Azure admin total, correct?
So you'll be able to clear Azure AZ 900, AZ 104, and AZ 400 certification with this.
Okay. So for this will you cover Kubernetes as well, correct?
Yes, we'll cover Kubernetes as well, because since it is very popular, so there are high chances that any project you go in, any environment you go in, you will encounter Kubernetes. So and you will have to write pipelines for Kubernetes. So that is what everyone is doing today. So we will cover Docker and Kubernetes so that you can write pipelines for those.
Okay. So for this we need coding knowledge for this
No,
training.
not much required. Not much required. Coding is not much required. All you have to understand is configuration. All you understand is basics that we are going to cover, like how network is working, and how OS is working, Linux basics. So all that we will do, we'll practice so that you will understand those basics. Coding is not required. You might have to understand few things related to how a build happens, and in some language how dependencies are there in another language. So that we will discuss as in when required. So like not much of knowledge is required, but I'll explain you whenever it is required.
Okay.
So
Okay. Thank
a
you.
little practice would do after that. So yeah,
Okay.
like
Any
Thank you.
cloud?
how do you write pipelines for Java, how do you write pipelines for .NET, how do you write pipelines for Python. So when we are discussing this, you might come across different programming languages, but you need not have a complete understanding on the language. I'll explain you how to approach if there is a new language.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Mukunda.
Hi Mukunda.
Yeah. Any cloud migration part will covered in this session?
So actually that part we might not cover. So, but I'll explain you how do we migrate as a generic. So what we'll do is we will be having some projects which you will run it in your local, and I will explain you how those are copied or moved to cloud. Okay, so we might not cover how resources as a whole are migrated, like how VMs are migrated in data center to cloud. So all this we might not cover. Like generic we might cover, but not in depth. So I'll give you basics so that you can go in that direction deep if you are more interested in that. For
Okay.
freshers, it is a good opportunity, I would say,
No, who is
because today,
working in some other technology like SAP? So SAP cloud migration that will help in the future like that.
yes. So if you have that experience, it will obviously going to help. So yeah. For freshers it is also good, because any project, they prefer freshers so that they can easily train them and get into their own technology space. So if you are having the knowledge of other things, it is going to help you in your long run. So even if few concepts you might not be using today, for example, if I teach you the storage concepts as a whole, so you might not be using storage at all in your near future, but sometime later you might use that knowledge to come back. So that will be. Is there any
How about the
certification?
practical knowledge?
You will do it practically. I will explain you. I will show you practically. You need to set up things in your own laptop and do it. I will give you assignments to do it. For example, we will set up multiple virtual machines in your laptop. I'll give you assignment I'll show you how to install Docker Kubernetes. I'll show you how to spin up a pod. I will give you assignment of spinning up some other pod. So you will have to set up, replicate my environment in yours, and you will have to do something extra on it so that you do it and you understand. So it's going to be practical.
Okay, for example, we are going to 45 days, right? Each
Yeah.
day is 1 hour, right?
Yes.
Okay, for example, we miss the class. Shall we get any recording sessions like that?
I think if they're recording this session, I think you can get this recording. I think you can talk to the management once and you can get that recording.
Because every day and sometime we will miss the classes, right? So we will get all the classes recording as well. It's good for us.
Yes,
Is
yes,
it
I think
possible? Or?
yes, it is possible. We'll make sure that you get recorded.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there any certification courses are required?
So after the course, you can opt for certification and get the certification. I'll explain you how to, approach certification, how to apply certification, and how to get the certification for the course.
So what are the needed? AZ 900 or any other?
No, it is not needed. It is not needed. After once you complete the course, you will be able to, appear for the exam and clear it.
Okay.
Okay, you can clear AZ 900, you can clear AZ 104, and you can clear AZ 400. These three certifications you can clear after the completion of this course.
Okay.
Okay, does this session cover infrastructure as a code or not? Yes, we will touch the concepts of Terraform, we'll touch concepts of ARM templates, we will see what is infrastructure as a code is, how resources are created or maintained using infrastructure as a code today, because you might end up in a scenario where there is a project where everything they are managing using Terraform or ARM templates. So I don't want you to be completely surprised on what this alien technology is about. So I will be touching a lot of technologies which I'm sure you will come across in your projects which we are going to work. So the depth, due to time constraint, we might not get into depth of all the technologies, but I'll make sure I at least touch the basics of all technologies, so that any type of technology you get into, you should be able to pick it up and master it in the direction that you will understand. Okay.
So hi, what are the topics you are covered in this course, like Azure DevOps and ADO and everything, right? Is there any extra added? Like CI/CD in the ADO only, or
No, in
covered
Azure
any
DevOps, we are
Jenkins?
going to cover CI/CD. Jenkins, we are not going to cover. We will cover the pipelines from Azure. Okay, since it is Azure DevOps, so we are going to see the CI, how to write CI and CD pipelines in Azure DevOps.
ADO.
Okay, so we are not going to cover. Session timings will be morning 8 to 9, or I think mostly it will be 8 to 9 only.
Okay.
Okay, so let us get into one more concept, Azure DevOps, for the demo purpose. So let us see how do we take it. Okay, so I'm going to explain you on a very high level what are the features of Azure DevOps, what is DevOps lifecycle, what is CI/CD overview, and CI/CD lifecycle. Okay, let us start with features of Azure DevOps. In Azure DevOps, we have 5 features. Okay, the first feature of Azure DevOps is Azure Boards. In this Azure Boards, we do all the documentation and planning required for the project. So in this boards, we get a console where we can define sprints, where we can define the type of model that we are going to implement. Like if it is mostly we prefer agile model. So how that model is going to work, we do capacity planning in this using Azure boards. Like if there is a team of 10 members, okay, if there are 10 developers in the team, then what is the load on each developer, which developer is going to work on which feature, how much a developer can work per day. If a developer is working 6 hours, then how long he should be working for, like next 2 weeks. So all that planning and documentation part happens in Azure boards. So where do we use Azure boards? Suppose there is customer and customer has a requirement, he gets an idea to create something new. For example, he wants to create a home delivery application like Swiggy or Zomato, food delivery application. Customer comes with a requirement saying, I want to create a food delivery app. Then the first thing that the project managers, the scrum masters, they do is they get into the Azure boards and they try to plan the project. Okay, what they do is, since it is a very big application, they put it in Azure DevOps boards and they divide it into smaller chunks, because we cannot develop a big application like that without planning, right? So we divide it, we break it into small parts. Okay, we break it into small features and we put it in Azure boards. And then we do the capacity planning, the scrum master. So what is scrum is a type of methodology that we follow. Okay, so earlier what used to happen is, customer used to come and they used to give requirement. For example, I want to have an app. Then the team used to sit and develop it for 1 year or 2 years. That they used to call it as waterfall model. And at the end of that year, at the end of first year or second year, they used to go to the customer and give them the software that they have developed. So but the problem with this used to be, whatever the requirement the customer gave, the end result was not matching with the customer's requirement. So what today is happening is, today we are developing every 2 weeks or every 1 month. We show it to customer, we take customer's approval if this product is going in the direction that he is imagining it to go. In this way, what is happening is, customer is not at all, like, not surprised all of a sudden at the end of the project completion. So this type of model that we follow today is called Agile. And the model that people used to follow a decade ago is called waterfall. So what is a waterfall model? A waterfall model, the development will happen for continuously for over a long period of time, and at the end of the project we will hand over the product to the customer, hand over the software to the customer. So but the drawbacks of this type of model used to be, the end result was not matching with customer's requirement. Or if there is a requirement change in between, if customer wants to change some feature, okay, this should work in certain way, not this way, then it used to be very difficult for the developers to change it. But today we are following a model called Agile, where we release features every sprint. So every 15 days or every 30 days. So we can define sprint. Mostly, what is a sprint? A sprint is a time frame. So mostly in today's industry, we take 2 weeks as sprint. So every 2 weeks, we make sure that we release some features to the customer and we take customer approval if this product is going in the direction that he has imagined it to go. This is called Agile model. So all that planning of sprint planning, capacity planning, who is working on what. So all this is documented in the feature called Azure boards. So once the customer has given a requirement, once the the requirement is broken into pieces, we create something called as backlogs. Backlogs is comes from the term in our college, the whatever subjects we never used to clear are called backlogs, right? Whatever we fail. So similarly, we create backlogs in Azure boards, and each developers are assigned those backlogs. So the work of developer is to pick up those backlogs and work on it so that they clear the backlogs. So once all the backlogs are cleared, the project is completed. That's how it is seen. Okay, so all that documentation happens in Azure boards. Now the next feature of Azure DevOps is Azure Repo. So once we have the planning, like who is going to develop what, who is going to test what. So even testing team will have some backlogs. Even DevOps team will have some backlogs. So what are the things which they're going to achieve? So everyone will have their own backlogs and they will be working on it. So the next feature that we talk about in Azure DevOps is Azure repos. So we should have a repository, we should have a centralized place where we can place our code, right? Whatever everyone is developing. So the mostly all the projects they'll be developing some other product. The product might vary, but the development is same across. So whatever they are developing, whatever language they are developing, it has to be kept in some centralized place. So for that we have a feature in Azure DevOps called Azure Repo. Okay, so you would have come across many public repositories like GitHub or some other repositories, but in Azure we use Azure repos. We can also integrate GitHub with Azure. So whatever the Azure is so flexible that whatever the version control, whatever the tools are, irrespective of the irrespective of their background that they come from, we can integrate with Azure DevOps. So even if you're not happy, or if you're not happy with the features that you're going to use with Azure DevOps, you can integrate. For example, the alternative for Azure boards in market today is Jira. Many teams use Jira, so they can integrate their Jira with Azure DevOps to perform their actions, and they can use Azure Repo. If they don't want Azure Repo, they can use Azure Boards and GitHub. So I'll explain you how to configure those and where to configure those, and we'll see while we are practicing. Even you will do it on your own. So Azure Repo, we need a centralized repository where code can be stored and multiple developers can work parallelly. So I might be working on a feature, you might be working on some other feature. So if there are 10 developers, 10 different developers will be working on 10 different features. But at the end, when we give it to customer, we have to collectively take all the code, all the development, and we have to give it as an end product. So to keep it centrally, the feature is Azure repos, where we upload all the code, we commit, we push all our code to Azure repos. Okay, and then what do? We build it. So if you take any language, for example, let it be Java or .NET, what do? We write code and we build it so that we get a executable file which is understandable by the computer. So we understand code, we write it, but computer should so the system, the compute should understand the code, right? So for that we have to compile it, we have to build it. So when developers are developing a feature, they will build it or they will compile it in their own local. But when we take all the developers, suppose 10 developers, they have written the feature, they have tested the feature is working fine, but the end objective is to test all the features together. So you might have to test payments gateway if it is working fine or not, if the cart is working fine or not, if the profile is working fine or not. So when you have to test all the features together, you should have a central place where you are building it. You getting it? So if there are 10 developers, I might have tested, okay, I might have tested the payment services and I say that it is working fine in my system, I have built it, it is working fine. And you might come and say that, okay, I have also built my feature, the cart feature, the adding items to the cart is working fine, I am done from my side. But when we go to customer, he should see a product in which both are working fine at the same time. Okay, so for that, what do? We take all the code and put it in Azure repo, and then we should have a central place to build it. I cannot build it in my laptop or your laptop, because my code is not there in your laptop and your code is not there in my laptop. So what do? We both push our code to Azure repo. Then what do? We need a tool to build and get the executable. That is where the Azure pipelines come. So what do pipelines do? Pipelines take the code and they build it with the other code. So build it as a project. So they build it as a branch. So we'll see what are these things. Okay, so for now you understand that we take all the code from all the developers and we compile it to get the final output, final executable. For that there are two types of pipelines. One is CI, one is CD. What is CI? CI is continuous integration. So continuous integration is as soon as I finish developing a feature, it should merge it with central repository and it should build it and it should deploy it. As soon as you are finished with your feature, it should merge it automatically, it should build it, it should deploy it. So that is CI pipeline. So CI is continuous integration. Continuously, whatever the features are being developed by developers, it should be integrated with the main software. Okay, the main build code, main executable. Okay, and CD is, as soon as the build is done, it should be deployed somewhere. It should be running somewhere. So till now, the code was running in my laptop. The feature was running in my laptop. One more feature was running in your laptop. But for the customer to access this code as a whole should run somewhere. That is where the different environments, it might be running in Docker and Kubernetes in Azure, it might be running in Docker and Kubernetes on premise, it might be running in some other cloud provider like AWS or GCP. So in using Azure, you can deploy your executable, the changes, to any one of these places using CD pipeline. So CD is continuous deployment. So you have to deploy whatever you have built, whatever it has built, whatever it has executed to some environment. That environment, like that process is called CD, continuous deployment. So all this happen automatically. So as a DevOps engineer, what you have to do, you have to write a pipeline in such a way that whenever developer commits, whatever language it may be, it could be .NET, Java, whatever language he commits, you have to make sure that you write a pipeline so that it builds and it is deployed to the target. So you will be given the source, you will be given the target, you have to write the pipeline. So for that also there are multiple options. I will explain you how to write a pipeline, how to design a pipeline. You need to ask a lot of questions. Whenever you are given a requirement, you need to ask questions. You need to ask the right questions before you get into the job. So I'll explain to you how to approach this scenario. Suppose you are given a new language which you don't know. For example, you don't know Java and you are asked to write pipeline. So what are the questions you should ask to write a pipeline in Java or any new language? You should ask what is the source, how it is built. You need to check how it is built. Then you need to put those commands in the pipeline. You need to check how it is deployed, where to deploy. You need to ask them and you need to deploy. Okay. The next feature that we have is Azure Artifacts. So whenever the CI is completed, continuous integration is done, the build file is generated, it is saved in a central place called Azure Artifacts. So Azure Artifacts, it's for saving. So different type of technologies will have different types of build. Java will have a Maven repository, Node.js will have npm, .NET will have NuGet. So depending on the type of build, we can store it in a central place called Azure Artifacts. From this Azure Artifacts, your CD will take the continuous deployment, will take the build and it will deploy it to the target. So the last feature that we have in Azure is whenever we are having this CI integration, we can even integrate the testing part of it. We can perform manual testing, we can write test cases so that whenever a developer commits the code, pushes the code to the Azure repo, while integrating, while building, it can test if the code is proper or not. If there are any errors, it can intimate the developer then and there, so that he can correct and again push it. So we'll see how to write test cases. We'll see what is manual testing, what is exploratory testing. We'll go through the details of it later. Okay. Now these are the 5 features of Azure overview. We will cover in detail. We'll check practicals of how things are, how to work with different technologies and all. So the first thing is Azure boards, where all the planning happens. Whenever customer gives a requirement, we plan it there in Azure boards. Then is Azure repos, where we maintain the code centrally, so that when we give it to the customer, the end product, it is there centrally somewhere, the code. Next is the Azure pipelines, where we write CI and CD pipelines. So what is a CI pipeline? It is continuous integration. It will integrate each developer's code with the main code. Okay, so there is a main repository code which is there in Azure repo. So any new feature the developer pushes, the CI pipeline is responsible for picking up the new changes and building it and putting the build in Azure artifact. From there, from Azure artifact, the CD pipeline pulls it and pushes it to the target environment. Okay, we'll see what is stage deployment, types of deployment, where to deploy and all. And then last is Azure test plan. We'll see how to write testing plans while CI is happening, while integrating, types of testing plans, how to write and all. All these things we'll see in details when we go through the process. Okay. Now let us understand about life cycle of DevOps. This I have already explained so far. The first thing is customer comes with a requirement. The second thing is the business analyst or product owner. There'll be some person like managers or masters. They put it, they translate it into requirement and they put it in backlogs. And then they even do capacity planning and sprint planning depending on the project, like how many people are needed to deliver this, how many days it requires. They break the days into sprints. Sprint is nothing but a time frame of 2 weeks or 4 weeks. Generally, it is 2 weeks. Okay, and then there is repos from where from where the central code is stored and where the developers push their features, push their new code, any changes to it, they push it there. Okay. And once we push the code there, once the developer pushes the code, your CI pipeline is triggered. It goes and it builds it with the whatever features they have added. It builds entirely with the new build. It builds a new executable and it pushes to artifact. From there, CD is triggered. CD, it takes the build and it deploys it in the target environment. So generally there are 3 types of environment. One is testing environment, UAT environment, and production environment. In testing environment, the testing team does all their manual testing, and if they find any bug, they again put those bugs in Azure boards, so that developer can pick again the bugs from the board and he can work on the bugs. Once he fix something, for example, adding to cart a few items are not happening, it's not working fine, so that testing team will identify that this item is not adding to cart properly, please check. So he'll update the bug in Azure boards. So depending upon his capacity, developer will pick up the bug, he'll work on it, again he will push the new code to the repo. Once he pushes the new code to the repo, again they will fetch it. What CI will fetch it from the repo, it will build it, it will put it to artifacts. From artifacts, CD will fetch it, the pipeline will fetch it, and it will deploy it in respective environment. So it will again deploy it in testing environment. Again, testing team will check. If they're satisfied that okay, this bug is cleared, there is no problem with this, they will approve it and it will go to UAT environment. So in this environment, generally people from your customer side, there'll be a team in customer side, they check if the feature is as per their expectation. They will test everything. If they are okay, if they are satisfied with that, they will approve it to production, and it will be there for their customer. Our customer's customer will use the product. Okay, you're getting it? So this is a DevOps life cycle as a whole. Okay, now coming to CI/CD overview. In CI/CD, as I said, once you commit the code to repo, okay, we will have CI pipeline and CD pipeline. So in CI pipeline, it will build it, it will test it. We can even integrate third-party tools to perform some action. So this pipeline is highly customizable. You can customize it as per the requirement. So in this diagram here, we have integrated something called Sonar Cube. What this tool does, it checks if there are any syntax error or bugs in the code while building it. Okay, if there are any, it cancels the build, it cancels the pipeline will fail, and it will send a mail to the developer saying that please fix it. So once the developer fixes it, again commits it, again the pipeline will start. Okay, and then next is we can have other technologies like white source security to check if there are any vulnerabilities. Suppose he is using a module which is deprecated and need not be used, then this will again cancel the build immediately, and it will tell the developer that you need to again build, change the code and build it, change the code and commit it, and then it will build it. So here we are automating the building process. So all this process happens in a machine, like you require a compute, right? All this process used to happen in developers VM till now. But when we do it in Azure also should have some compute to do it, right? So those machines where this CI pipeline or CD pipeline run are called agents. Again, there are two types of agents: Windows based agents and Linux based agents. And that is why you will require the basics of understanding of Linux OS and Windows OS, because if something goes wrong in pipeline, if everything is right from the developers end, but build is not happening, you have to get into the agent and you have to fix the issues. So that's where that knowledge of OS will come into picture. Okay, so once CI is done, it is pushed to artifact, Azure artifact. From artifact, your CD will pull it and it will deploy it in different environments. So first it will put in development. It will then the testing team will test it. If they're satisfied, they'll put it in QA. Again, they will test it. If they're satisfied, they'll put it in staging. Staging environment. They will the users from the customer side will test it. So QA and UAT, it is both same. After that, they will put it in staging and then prod. So for prod, we'll have two types, that is staging and prod. So what are these? So when you're using an app, let us suppose you're using WhatsApp. Okay, there are a lot of features that are released to WhatsApp in a daily basis, but it is like unlikely that you experience any downtime. It's very rare that you experience a downtime due to any updates or upgrades. So how does that happen? So what do they do is, what everyone does it, whatever new features or updates are there, they put it in an environment called staging. Okay, and if they feel that everything is right, and when they feel that the usage is less, they will swap it with production. So that the end user will not know when the new features have swapped with the old feature. So that is where we use two types of, I'll explain you how to have the staging environment, production environment, how do we swap. So this was a life cycle of overview of CI/CD, and I think due to time constraint, I'm not explaining showing you practical today, but when we get into the topic, I'll show you practicals. I'll ask you to implement it. I'll give you some assignments on top of it. You will have to do it, and we'll see how to troubleshoot if there are any issues. And yeah, so that's it from my side, guys. Any doubts so far? You can always ask me. If you are not comfortable now, you can go back and you can do your own study. And if you have any doubts, you can ask me then. You can ping me personally and ask. So I'm always open to explaining n number of times till you get the concept right. Okay. Any doubts is so far?
Hi, Fanindra. This is Praveen here. Regarding the Azure Infra and DevOps, like what is the duration you are taking for Infra and DevOps? Approximate.
So approximately it's going to be like 20, like it's going to be 60-40. 60% we are going for Azure, 40% it's going to be DevOps.
Okay. Okay.
I want to give a little more weightage towards Azure because once you're clear with a lot of technologies there, you will be easily able to pick up DevOps.
Yeah. True. Thanks, man.
Okay.